Welcome on the 7:30 on Label Television. Today, Friday, December 1st, 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, here are today's headlines.
The first liver transplant on an infant in Tunisia and the Arab world. The Tunisian doctors performed miracles, an operation that required a team of 20 doctors and paramedics and lasted 11 hours. Alongside his African tour, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, and his Ivorian counterpart, Alassane Ouattara, proceed on Thursday to launch the work of the Abidjan Metro project at the Trècheville station.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. In Africa, as elsewhere in the world, men represent the blind spot of the fight against the HIV epidemic, according to UNAIDS report published on the 1st December on the occasion of the World AIDS Day. Get the story.
In sub-Saharan Africa, men living with HIV are 20% less likely to know their HIV status than HIV-positive women and girls, and 27% less likely to have access to treatment. A study conducted in South Africa by UNAIDS showed that 70% of men who died of AIDS-related illnesses never sought treatment. In KwaZulu-Natal, the province with the highest HIV prevalence in South Africa, only 1 in 4 20 to 24-year-old men living with HIV learned that they had contracted the virus in 2015. And in Central and West Africa, where efforts are being made to respond effectively to HIV, only 25% of HIV-positive men have access to treatment. In question, according to the executive director of UNAIDS, Michel Sidibe, the persistence of a certain machismo and prejudices that do not create the conditions for a sexuality free of the virus. In Uganda, for example, some respondents prefer to avoid knowing their HIV status to avoid a stigma associated with emasculation, he says. This gap is also the result of health services designed for women, where they can more easily be screened during antenatal examinations, for example, says the director of the UN agency. Men consult healthcare services less frequently than women, have fewer health checks, and are diagnosed with a life-threatening illness later in life than women. The injection drug, which is a mode of transmission of the disease, is also a growing phenomenon in Africa, especially in Mauritius and Seychelles, notes also Michel Sidibe. However, 80% of the 12 million people who inject drugs are men. The same is true in prison, where 90% of the prisoners are men and where the prevalence of the virus is very high. The executive director of ONU-SIDA, however, is optimistic about the general evolution of the epidemic. According to him, the number of new infections has dropped by 48% compared to 2005, the year that represents the peak of the epidemic. Currently, there are 36.7 million people living with HIV in the world, the majority, 25 million on the African continent, 11 million of whom do not have access to treatment. With significant disparities, 6 million people living with HIV in West and Central Africa compared with 19 million in Southern and Eastern Africa. A figure that should not overshadow the considerable progress made in few years in this area. The most notable case is that of South Africa, where the number of people on treatment rose from 90 in 2000, when President Thabo Mbeki doubted the reality of the epidemic, to 4 million recently. In Swaziland, 90% of HIV-positive people are now on treatment.
It happens this afternoon, local time in Libreville. The Zimbabwe president named senior military officials to cabinet posts. In fact, Mnangagwa named Patrick Shinamaza as finance minister, Air Marshal Perence Shiri as land minister, and Major General Sibusiso Moyo as foreign minister. And at the same time, the president opened a 3-month amnesty window for the return of the public funds illegally stashed abroad by some individuals and company, and upon the expiry of the amnesty at the end of February next year. The government will arrest and prosecute those who have failed to comply, and Mnangagwa said that today in a statement. Remember that the president has sworn in and promised to tackle corruption, which had become endemic under former President Robert Mugabe. On the sideline of the African Union, European Union Summit held in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, President Ouattara and Emmanuel Macron from France officially opened on November 13 the works of the Abidjan Metro, while the running of this urban train was announced for 2019-2020, but now it's in 2022 that it will be operational. Story.
On the sidelines of the 5th African Union-European Union Summit, Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara and his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron officially launched the works of the Abidjan Metro Line 1 on November 30th during a symbolic journey by connecting Train Plateau to Treichville for the laying of a first stone, accompanied by the Ivorian Prime Minister Amadou Kon Coulibaly and the French Minister of Interior Gérard Collomb. Alassane Ouattara was delighted by the excellent Franco-Ivorian relationship, one of the fruits of which is the Urban Train project. Funded 100% by France, up to 1.4 billion euros, the first stretch of the 37.5 kilometers will connect the town of Anyama north to Port Bouet in southern Abidjan in 50 minutes, stopping at 20 stations. While the project had been postponed several times, the Abidjan urban train will not be operational until 2022. A consortium of French groups was selected to carry out the works. Bouygues Public Works for civil engineering, Colas Rail for tracks and systems, Alstom for trains and signaling, and Keolis, a subsidiary of SNCF, for the operation and maintenance. Additional studies are still being finalized. The project was revised at the request of the Ivorian Party, who wished to have a train that meets the latest technological standards while respecting the environment. Transport capacity has also been increased from 300,000 travelers per day to 500,000. In early October 2017, after France agreed to finance the entire project, the Korean companies Hyundai Motor and Doxan Development had withdrawn from negotiations while Alstom had entered.
As Côte d'Ivoire is making a big difference in the city, it also happened in Tunisia, where Radouane Harbi, the director of the Fatouma Bourguiba University Hospital in Monastir, a seaside province in central eastern Tunisia, announced on Wednesday the success of a pediatric liver transplant operation in an 18-month-old infant, in first time in Tunisia and in Africa. Get the details.
There is a big hope in medical sector in Africa. It's a medical feat. On November, for the first time in Tunisia, doctors managed to perform a liver transplant on a 2-year-old child. The operation was carried out by the team of doctors at Fatouma Bourguiba University Hospital, located in Monastir. It was an historic day for Tunisian, Arab and African medicine, said Abdelatif Enouri, the chief of the pediatric surgery department and surgeon principal responsible for this operation performed that night. The operation was carried out by a team of 20 doctors and paramedical staff and lasted 11 hours. The hospital director pointed out that the date of the surgery has been fixed since last year, recalling that the preparation for the completion of this transplant lasted 3 years, thanks also to a partnership with French hospital Necker Enfants Malades in Paris. But in fact, the fruit of this agreement with the hospital in France would have cost 500,000 dinars to the CNAM if the operation is practiced in Europe, according to the group of the Tunisian Association of Senior Technicians in Surgery. The baby remained under medical supervision for 5 days to ensure acceptance of his body from the transplanted organ. A boon for patients with pathologies in the liver, since the success of the first will encourage the medical staff to perform similar operation. The initiative, it's also good to mention, was first announced by the former Minister of Health, Slim Chaker, on the 6th October, but unfortunately, he is not alive to share the joy of the medical team, the ministry, and the parents of the patients.
Innovation in technology and science could have stopped the continent. The university graduate and inventor Brian Turiobagi has created a biomedical smart jacket that actually can diagnose pneumonia faster than a doctor. He named the jacket Mama Hope, also Mother's Hope, referencing to the 27,000 children who died of pneumonia in Uganda every year. An innovation that will change lives and many. Watch the reports.
Africa is an appealing soil for investors and entrepreneurs since innovation is rising at a remarkable pace. For that stint, the Ugandan inventor was encouraged to carry this project following the death of his friend's grandmother of pneumonia. According to Bagie, the mixed diagnosis of the disease is the main cause of death. Such was the case of his friend's grandmother. Therefore, he designed a smart jacket called Mama Hope, Mother's Hope, to help diagnose pneumonia and offer a beam of hope to Ugandan children. It is very important to acknowledge that in sub-Saharan Africa, nearly 500,000 children die from pneumonia each year. When asked one of the students who created the jacket, Brian Turigbagie explained the inventions. Mama Hope means mother's hope. When a child is born, a mother hopes that they will live to a certain age, but because of the many diseases in our country, it's not always possible. I know lots of people who have been impacted by pneumonia. It's a big tragedy that our country has. And doctors easily make it for malaria, misdiagnosis in very common. But people self-diagnose as well as they get it wrong because everyone knows about malaria, but not about pneumonia in the same way. But how it works? Actually, a modified stethoscope is put in a vest, then it's linked to a mobile phone app that records the audio of the patient's chest. This analysis of that audio can detect lung crackles and can lead to preliminary diagnosis. The Mama Hope jacket measures a sick children's temperature and breathing rate. It diagnoses pneumonia 3 to 4 times faster than a doctor and eliminates most possibility for a human hair.
Let us move to the far north region of Cameroon, precisely in Maroua, where there is the popular abattoir market. It's one of the main 5 markets of the town that provides varieties of food items at affordable prices. Our correspondent, Elise Kenimbeni, tells us more in these elements.
Situated in the Maroua Council, Marché Abattoir, as commonly known in French, got its name from the simple fact that it is the main site of butchers and the place where meat is sold in abundance. Being a reference in the town of Maroua, the market is well known for the quality of its fresh food items and the variety of crops and vegetables.
This water leaf that we are selling with water and we call him Punko. So we sell it with euro. Like this is 3 for 500. Then with crayfish, you can eat crayfish or gari.
The market attracts people from Monday to Sunday thanks to its diversity in food items and the imports made by traders.
Nearly everything that we sell here are the things that are not cultivated here in Maroua. We transport them. Sometimes I transport from Batibo, Bali, Bamenda, Bafusam, Yaoundé before reaching here in Maroua.
Many traders who have been selling here for the past 8 to 10 years are satisfied by the benefits produced, yet they are faced at times with some socio-cultural hindrances.
Because these people here in Maroua, they don't understand even French. The simple French, they don't understand. Some of them don't even know how to say good morning in French. But if you cannot speak in their dialect, you cannot sell.
Marché Abattoir, presently under construction by the Maroua Urban Council, is expected to drain more persons, notably strangers and foreigners, visiting the town of Maroua in the far north region.
In culture, now at the Cartier Foundation in Paris, the photographer from Mali, Malik Sidibé, continues to inspire the young generations in terms of graphic designing. More information reported by Georgina Mpiga.
Last year, November 1st, 2016, authorities in Ethiopia arrested a leading opposition by the name Marara Gundina. He is a leader of the Oromo Federalist Congress, in short OFC. We are now in 2017 and he remains in jail, facing multiple criminal charges downgraded from an earlier charge of terrorism. At the time, he was said to have violated the country's state of emergency by having contact with persons the government had branded terrorists or anti-peace elements. Gudina was arrested at his home as he returned from a trip to Europe during the time he addressed the European Parliament on political events back home. He is an ardent critic of the government's crackdown on protesters in Amhara and Oromia regions. The state of emergency of October 2016 were to quell spreading anti-government protests mainly in Roma and Arama regions. Since his detention, a group of United States senators, ministers ministers of the European Parliament, in short MEP, and others have called of his release and for the government to address political discontent in the East African country.
A word in sport now, where Moscow was the center of attention for today, Friday, December 1st, the date of the draw of the FIFA 2018 World Cup. And in total, 4 pots contain 8 teams each. Goalkeeper Chino have more detail, which team will face one another during the first round of the competition.
The 32 qualified teams and the fans around the world are now fixed. Friday, December the 1st, 8 former winners of the competition, from Diego Maradona to Laurent Blanc through Ronaldo, have drawn the 8 poles that will mark the start of the 2018 World Cup in Russia. The ceremony was hosted by former British striker Gary Lineker and Russian journalist Maria Komandnya. It started at 6 p.m. local time. 4 years ago, it lasted nearly an hour and a half. The draw itself began after about 50 minutes of presentation and lasted a half hour. The 32 qualified nations are therefore divided into 4 parts of 8 according to the position in the FIFA rankings published last October. The only exception is Russia, placed in the first part and said to be playing in Group A. The host country will avoid Germany, Brazil, Portugal, Argentina, Belgium, Poland and France, ranked 1st to 7th worldwide.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for choosing Label Television to inform you. Please stay tuned for the upcoming news in French. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same channel. Good night.